The morning sun cast long shadows across the Naval Special Warfare Command training facility in Coronado, California. Master Chief Petty Officer Thomas Tank Morrison adjusted his tactical vest and checked his watch. Another day of putting rookie SEAL candidates through hell was about to begin. He had been doing this for 12 years, breaking down wannabe warriors and building them back up into America's elite fighting force. What Tank didn't know was that today would be different. Today, everything he thought he knew about combat training would be challenged by a woman who wasn't even supposed to be there. Lena Gray sat in the passenger seat of a black sedan, watching the waves crash against the beach beyond the fence. At 28, she had already lived 3 different lives. The first is Elena Vasquez, daughter of a Mexican immigrant family in East Los Angeles. The second as Lieutenant Gray, United States Marine Corps intelligence officer. The third was still being written, and it involved secrets that could get people killed. "You sure about this?" asked Agent Marcus Webb from the driver's seat. He was FBI, Counterintelligence Division, and had been Lena's handler for the past 6 months. "These SEAL guys don't play around. They find out who you really are, and this whole operation goes to hell." Lena touched the small scar on her left temple, a souvenir from Fallujah. "They won't find out. I've been preparing for this longer than they've been training their recruits." The sedan pulled through the security checkpoint. Lena's fake credentials identified her as Dr. Elena Morrison, a Department of Defense psychological warfare specialist brought in to evaluate new training protocols. The name Morrison wasn't an accident. Tank Morrison was her target, though he didn't know it yet. 3 months earlier, Marine Corps intelligence had intercepted communications suggesting that someone inside SEAL Team 6 was selling classified information to foreign buyers. The leak had already cost American lives in Syria, and more operations were compromised. Traditional investigation methods had failed. The SEALs protected their own, and outsiders were met with walls of silence. That's where Lena came in. She wasn't just any Marine. She was the daughter of immigrants who had learned to blend in anywhere. She was a decorated combat veteran who understood the warrior mindset. And she was a woman, which meant the SEALs would underestimate her until it was too late. The facility buzzed with activity as morning training sessions began. Lena walked through the compound, her heels clicking on concrete, carrying a briefcase full of psychological evaluation forms and hidden recording equipment. She wore a conservative business suit and glasses projecting the image of a desk-bound academic who had never seen real combat. Tank Morrison was easy to spot. 6 feet 4 inches of muscle and attitude, surrounded by a group of younger instructors who hung on his every word. His reputation preceded him. 2 tours in Afghanistan, 3 in Iraq, countless classified missions that would never make it into any official record. He was also the prime suspect in the intelligence leak investigation. "Master Chief Morrison?" Lena approached with a professional smile. "Son. I'm here to observe your training protocols for the psychological resilience study." Tank looked her up and down with obvious skepticism. "Doc, with all due respect, this isn't a place for civilians. These boys are learning to kill people and break things. Might be too intense for someone used to pushing papers. I appreciate your concern, Master Chief. However, I have clearance from Admiral Richardson himself. I'm here to evaluate stress response patterns in high-pressure training environments." She handed him a folder of official-looking documents. Tank flipped through the papers, his jaw tightening. "Fine. But you stay back, you don't interfere, and if I tell you to move, you move fast. These weapons are live, and accidents happen." What Tank didn't know was that Lena had qualified expert marksmen with 7 different weapon systems. She had been in more firefights than half his instructors. But she nodded meekly and followed him to the outdoor firing range where SEAL candidates were running through close-quarters combat drills. The exercise was designed to test decision-making under pressure. Candidates moved through a mock village populated with cardboard targets representing enemies, hostages, and civilians. Split-second decisions meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. In real combat, those same split-second decisions meant the difference between life and death. Lena watched Tank work. He was good at his job, pushing candidates to their breaking points and beyond. But she also noticed things that others missed. The way he checked his phone during critical moments, how he stepped away to take certain calls, the subtle signals he gave to specific candidates who seemed to receive easier evaluations. Rodriguez. Tank barked at a young Hispanic candidate who was struggling with the urban warfare scenario. You just got 3 hostages killed because you hesitated. In the real world, those are American citizens going home in body bags because you couldn't make a decision. The candidate, barely 22 years old, was shaking with exhaustion and stress. He had been running combat drills for 6 hours straight in 100-degree heat. Lena recognized the look in his eyes. She had seen it in the mirror during her own darkest moments in Iraq. Maybe he needs a water break, she suggested quietly to Tank. Maybe you need to remember that this isn't a day spa, Doc. We're building killers here, not kindergarten teachers. Tank's voice carried across the training ground, loud enough for everyone to hear. Lena said nothing, but she made mental notes. Tank Morrison was exactly the kind of old-school warrior who believed that brutality bred strength. The kind of man who might justify selling secrets if he convinced himself the money would be used to support fellow veterans or fund better training programs. The afternoon brought weapons training. Candidates moved through rifle qualification courses while Tank and his instructors evaluated their performance. Lena positioned herself near the instructor station, close enough to overhear conversations but far enough away to maintain her cover as a detached observer. That's when she heard it. Tank was talking to Staff Sergeant Williams, one of the senior instructors. Their conversation was low and careful, but Lena had learned to read lips during intelligence training. Package is ready for delivery, Tank said, checking his phone. Usual drop point Thursday night. Copy that. Payment confirmed. Williams asked. Half now, half on completion. Just like always. Lena felt her pulse quicken. This could be the break they needed. But she had to be careful. One wrong move, and months of preparation would be wasted. Worse, the real spy might disappear, leaving American operations compromised indefinitely. As the day continued, Lena observed more suspicious behavior. Tank frequently checked a second phone that he kept in a special pocket of his tactical vest. He spoke in code words that sounded like routine military communications, but felt wrong to someone with Lena's training. Most importantly, he was preparing to meet someone on Thursday night. The training exercise that would change everything began at 1,500 hours. Tank had designed a special scenario for the most advanced candidates, those closest to graduating from BUD/S training and joining operational teams. The exercise simulated a hostage rescue mission in an urban environment, complete with role-playing civilians and mock explosives. Listen up. Tank addressed the group of sweating, exhausted candidates. This is your final evaluation. You're going in hot to extract a high-value target from a terrorist compound. Rules of engagement are weapons tight until you identify hostile intent. Civilian casualties result in automatic failure. Lena watched from the observation platform as candidates prepared their equipment. These young men represented the future of American special operations. They deserved instructors who put mission success above personal profit. They deserved leaders who wouldn't sell their secrets to the highest bidder. The scenario began with explosive charges simulating breaching operations. Candidates moved through smoke and confusion, communicating through hand signals and whispered radio calls. Their movements were precise and deadly, the result of months of brutal training that had eliminated 90% of the original class. But something was wrong with this exercise. Lena noticed that Tank had modified the standard scenario in subtle ways. Extra cameras had been positioned throughout the mock compound. Additional recording equipment captured every tactical movement, every communication protocol, every piece of classified methodology that these candidates had learned. Master Chief. She approached Tank during a brief lull in the action. Those additional recording systems weren't mentioned in the training protocol briefing I received. Tank's eyes hardened. Those are for advanced analysis, document. Above your clearance level. But Lena knew better. Those recordings were intelligence gold mines. Foreign militaries would pay millions for detailed documentation of SEAL training methods, communication protocols, and tactical procedures. Tank wasn't just selling information. He was selling America's most closely guarded military secrets in high-definition video. The exercise continued, but Lena was no longer just observing. She was gathering evidence. Her briefcase contained sophisticated recording equipment that captured every conversation, every suspicious phone call, every piece of the puzzle that would eventually bring Tank Morrison down. As afternoon turned to evening, the final candidates completed their scenarios. Most had performed well, demonstrating the skills and judgment that would soon make them members of the world's most elite fighting force. They would go on to protect American interests in the darkest corners of the world, never knowing that their instructor had been documenting their every move for foreign buyers. Tank dismissed the candidates and began shutting down the training equipment. But Lena noticed he was careful to personally collect all the additional recording devices. Those recordings would never make it into official training archives. They would disappear into private hands, purchased by governments and organizations that meant America harm. Dr. Morrison, Tank approached her as she packed her observation notes. Interesting first day. Very educational, Master Chief. I'm particularly interested in your stress evaluation techniques. They're quite innovative. 12 years of experience, document. You learn to read people, learn to push the right buttons. These boys need to be ready for anything. And Thursday night? I assume that's when you compile your evaluation reports. Tank's expression didn't change, but Lena caught the tiny muscle twitch near his left eye. Thursday nights are my own time, Doc. Even Master Chiefs need to relax sometimes. As Lena left the facility that evening, she knew she was walking a tightrope. Tank Morrison was suspicious, dangerous, and had access to weapons and trained killers who would follow his orders without question. If he discovered her true identity, she could disappear into the California desert without a trace. But she also knew she was close to breaking open the biggest intelligence leak in modern SEAL history. American lives depended on stopping the flow of classified information. Young warriors like the candidates she had watched today deserved better than instructors who sold their secrets for money. Agent Webb was waiting in the parking lot, reading a newspaper in the front seat of a sedan. Lena climbed in without speaking, knowing that electronic surveillance equipment might be monitoring the area. They drove in silence until they reached a safe house 20 miles inland. Only then did Lena speak. He's dirty. The recordings, the phone calls, the meeting Thursday night. We have him. Evidence. Enough to start building a case. But we need Thursday night. That's when he makes the exchange. Webb nodded grimly. What about the other instructors? Williams looked involved. Probably. This might be bigger than just Morrison. Could be an entire network inside the special operations community. Then we shut them all down. Whatever it takes. Lena stared out the window at the darkening Pacific Ocean. Somewhere out there, American military personnel were risking their lives based on tactics and procedures that Tank Morrison was selling to their enemies. Every classified document, every training video, every piece of stolen intelligence made their jobs more dangerous and their missions more likely to fail. She thought about the young SEAL candidate who had struggled during the hostage scenario. Rodriguez, Tank had called him. In a few months, he might be leading a real hostage rescue in some hostile foreign country. His life could depend on the enemy not knowing exactly how American Special Forces operated. That's why Thursday night mattered. That's why Lena Gray was willing to risk everything to stop one corrupt instructor from destroying the lives of countless American warriors. But first, she had to survive 3 more days of being Dr. Lena Morrison, mild-mannered Pentagon analyst. She had to maintain her cover while gathering the evidence needed to bring down what might be the most damaging intelligence leak in military history. And she had to do it all while Tank Morrison watched her every move, growing more suspicious by the hour. The war for America's military secrets was about to begin. Lena Gray intended to win it, no matter what the cost. Tuesday morning brought fog and tension to the Coronado training facility. Lena arrived early, before most of the instructors, to set up additional observation equipment in the main classroom. Her cover, as Dr. Morrison, required detailed documentation of training methodologies, which gave her perfect justification for recording everything that happened. Tank Morrison was already there, reviewing files in his office. Through the window, Lena watched him sort through personnel folders, making notes on individual candidates. But these weren't standard evaluation reports. The files contained detailed psychological profiles, family information, financial backgrounds, and security clearance levels. A normal instructor would focus on training performance. Tank was building intelligence dossiers. Early bird today, Doc? Tank emerged from his office as Lena finished setting up her equipment. Most Pentagon types don't roll out of bed before 9. Old Marine Corps habits, Master Chief. Early to bed, early to rise, and all that. Lena kept her voice light and professional, but she noticed Tank's reaction to her military reference. His eyes narrowed slightly, studying her face with new interest. Marine Corps? Your file said you were Civilian Department of Defense. Lena's heart rate increased, but her expression remained calm. My father was a Marine. Grew up on base. Guess you could say it's in my blood. Tank nodded, but something had changed. He was no longer dismissing her as a harmless academic. She had become a person of interest, someone who deserved closer scrutiny. The morning training session focused on maritime operations. SEAL candidates practiced underwater infiltration techniques in the facility's dive tank, while instructors evaluated their performance under simulated combat conditions. The exercises were legitimate, but Lena noticed additional recording equipment positioned to capture every detail of the specialized techniques being demonstrated. Staff Sergeant Williams operated one of the underwater cameras, documenting fin-kicking patterns, breathing apparatus modifications, and navigation methods that would be invaluable to foreign naval special forces. Each recorded session was a masterclass in American underwater warfare, packaged for sale to the highest bidder. Interesting perspective you're getting today, Tank commented as they watched candidates struggle through a particularly challenging underwater navigation course. These techniques took U.S. decades to develop. The psychological stress factors are fascinating, Lena replied, maintaining her academic cover. The way you push these candidates beyond normal human limits reveals incredible insights into performance under pressure. Performance under pressure is what separates the living from the dead in our business. Tank's voice carried a hint of something darker. Sometimes you have to make hard choices to ensure the mission succeeds. Lena recognized the rationalization. Tank Morrison had convinced himself that selling military secrets was justified if the money supported better training or veteran benefits. It was a common psychological trap for military personnel involved in espionage. They started with noble intentions and gradually compromised their principles until they crossed lines they never thought they would cross. The underwater exercises continued until noon, when candidates took a break for equipment maintenance and physical recovery. Lena used the break to download data from her hidden recording devices and transmit encrypted updates to Agent Webb. The evidence against Tank was mounting, but they still needed to catch him in the act of transferring classified materials. That's when she discovered the facility's real secret. While reviewing footage from her morning recordings, Lena noticed something unusual in the background of one shot. Tank had been operating a computer terminal that displayed what looked like a secure military network interface. For just a few seconds, she could see classified file directories and encryption protocols that shouldn't have been accessible from a training facility computer. Tank Morrison wasn't just recording training sessions. He was directly accessing classified military databases and downloading operational intelligence that had nothing to do with SEAL training programs. Dr. Morrison? A voice behind her made Lena spin around. It was Rodriguez, the young candidate who had struggled during Monday's urban warfare exercise. His face was bruised from morning combat training, but his eyes were alert and intelligent. Yes. Can I ask you something? Privately, Lena glanced around the room. Tank was across the facility dealing with equipment issues, and other instructors were busy with their own tasks. She nodded for Rodriguez to continue. There's something weird going on here, he said quietly. Master Chief Morrison has been asking questions about our families, our personal lives. Stuff that's not related to training. And some of the other candidates have noticed things too. What kind of things? Extra cameras in places where there shouldn't be cameras. Recording equipment that gets set up and taken down when we're not supposed to be looking. And Master Chief has been meeting with people who aren't military, people who don't belong here. Lena felt a surge of adrenaline. The SEAL candidates had noticed the same suspicious activities she had been documenting. But, more importantly, Rodriguez was showing her that not everyone in the facility was compromised. There were still honest warriors who recognized when something was wrong. Have you reported these concerns to anyone? She asked. Who will we report to? Master Chief Morrison is in charge of our training. Going over his head could get us kicked out of the program. But some of us are starting to think that might be better than staying quiet about whatever's happening here. Before Lena could respond, Tank's voice boomed across the training area. Rodriguez. Morrison, what's the private conversation about? Dr. Morrison was asking about stress management techniques. Rodriguez replied smoothly. I was telling her about meditation methods I learned in college. Tank approached them with predatory focus. Rodriguez, meditation is for yoga instructors and kindergarten teachers. Warriors manage stress by eliminating threats and accomplishing missions. Maybe you need some additional motivation to understand that concept. Yes, Master Chief. No excuse, Master Chief. Report to the obstacle course. Full gear, full speed, until I tell you to stop. Tank's voice carried the authority of 12 years, commanding special operations personnel. Rodriguez snapped to attention and jogged away without another word. Problem, Doc? Tank's attention turned to Lena. No problem at all, Master Chief. I was gathering some additional psychological data points. Rodriguez seems like an intelligent young man. Rodriguez is soft. Thinks too much, questions too much. The SEAL teams don't need philosophers. They need killers who follow orders. Tank walked away, but Lena noticed he positioned himself where he could observe both her activities and Rodriguez's punishment run. The young candidate was struggling through an obstacle course designed to break down seasoned warriors, carrying full combat gear in the afternoon heat. The afternoon brought weapons training, and Lena noticed the increased security measures around the ammunition storage areas. Tank personally supervised the distribution and recovery of every round, every piece of equipment, every training device that could potentially be removed from the facility. He was protecting more than just standard military property. During the weapons qualification exercises, Lena observed Tank's interaction with visiting personnel. 3 men in civilian clothes arrived without fanfare and positioned themselves near the instructor's station. They weren't introduced to the training staff, but Tank spent considerable time briefing them on candidate performance and capabilities. One of the visitors was taking detailed notes about specific candidates, including Rodriguez. Another was recording the weapons qualification scores and marksmanship techniques being demonstrated. The third man seemed most interested in the facility's security measures, taking photographs of access points, surveillance systems, and personnel schedules. These weren't Department of Defense officials. They were intelligence gatherers, foreign operatives, or private contractors collecting information about America's most elite warriors. Lena activated the recording system in her briefcase and moved closer to the visitor area. She needed to document these people, identify them, and trace their connections to Tank Morrison. But she had to be careful. One suspicious move could blow her cover and potentially get her killed. Gentlemen, Tank addressed the visitors. These candidates represent the finest examples of American military training. As you can see, their capabilities exceed standard infantry by significant margins. Most impressive, replied one of the men in accented English. The marksmanship standards are considerably higher than expected. How do you maintain such consistency in performance? 12 years of refined techniques, sir. We've developed proprietary methods that produce reliable results across diverse candidate backgrounds. Lena recognized what was happening. Tank was conducting a sales presentation demonstrating the quality of American Special Operations training to potential buyers. The candidates were unknowing participants in a commercial transaction that would ultimately compromise their safety and effectiveness. Her recording equipment captured every word, every face, every detail of the illegal meeting. But she knew this was just the preliminary negotiation. The real exchange would happen Thursday night at the location Tank had mentioned to Staff Sergeant Williams. The weapons training concluded without incident, but Lena noticed increased tension among the honest instructors. Several were asking questions about the visiting civilians, questions that Tank deflected with vague references to Department of Defense evaluation specialists. The lies were becoming harder to maintain as more people became aware that something unusual was happening at the facility. After the visitors left, Lena approached one of the junior instructors, Petty Officer First Class David Chun. She had observed him during the past 2 days and concluded he was probably not part of Tank's operation. Chun was young, idealistic, and genuinely focused on training the best possible SEAL candidates. Petty Officer Chun, I'm working on a psychological evaluation of instructor stress factors. Do you have a few minutes to answer some questions? Sure, Dr. Morrison. Always happy to help with research that might improve our programs. Have you noticed any unusual stressors affecting instructor performance lately? Changes in routine, additional responsibilities, outside pressures? Chin glanced around to ensure they weren't being overheard. Actually, yes. Master Chief Morrison has been assigning extra duties that don't seem related to candidate training. Equipment monitoring, file management, communications with people outside our normal chain of command. Does that concern you? It's not my place to question the Master Chief's orders. But some of the tasks feel more like intelligence work than training supervision. And I joined the Navy to train warriors, not to shuffle papers for civilians. Lena made notes that looked academic, but were actually intelligence assessments. Chun was clean, probably several other junior instructors were clean, and the candidates themselves were definitely unaware of Tank's illegal activities. The corruption was limited to Tank Morrison and possibly a few senior staff members. That evening, Lena met Agent Webb at a different safe house, this one overlooking Mission Bay. The location gave them a clear view of potential surveillance while providing multiple escape routes if Tank's people had identified them as threats. The visitors were foreign intelligence, Lena reported. Probably Russian or Chinese, though I couldn't identify specific individuals. Tank's running a full-scale commercial operation, selling everything from training techniques to classified access. Database penetration? Confirmed. He's accessing files that have nothing to do with SEAL training. Operational intelligence, mission reports, personnel records from active units. This isn't just about training methods anymore. Webb studied the photographs Lena had managed to capture. Those faces look familiar. We've been tracking suspected intelligence operatives for months, but we could never prove they were obtaining classified materials. Thursday night is our chance. But Webb, there's something else. The honest instructors are getting suspicious, and at least one candidate is asking questions. If we don't move soon, Tank might shut down the operation and disappear, or he might eliminate potential witnesses. The possibility hung between them like a loaded weapon. Tank Morrison had spent 12 years learning to kill people efficiently and quietly. If he believed his operation was compromised, he wouldn't hesitate to protect himself by eliminating threats. There's a young candidate named Rodriguez who's been asking the right questions, Lena continued. Smart kid, natural leader, exactly the kind of person the SEAL teams need. But Tank sees him as a problem to be solved. Can you protect him without blowing your cover? Maybe, but if Tank decides Rodriguez is too dangerous to leave alive, there might not be much I can do. They spent the next hour developing contingency plans for Thursday night's operation. The goal was to catch Tank in the act of transferring classified materials while simultaneously protecting innocent personnel who might become collateral damage. It was a complex mission that required precise timing and flawless execution. As Lena drove back to her hotel that night, she thought about the young men she had been observing for the past 2 days. They represented the future of American Special Operations, volunteers who had dedicated their lives to protecting the country that Tank Morrison was betraying for money. Rodriguez, in particular, reminded her of herself at that age. Intelligent, determined, willing to question authority when something didn't feel right. Those qualities would make him an exceptional SEAL operator, but they also made him a target for corrupt instructors who preferred obedient followers over thinking warriors. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to gather evidence, and new risks that her cover might be blown. But Lena Gray had faced worse odds in Iraq and Afghanistan. She had survived firefights, explosions, and enemy interrogations. She could handle one corrupt Master Chief and his network of traitors. The question was whether she could do it without getting innocent people killed in the process. Wednesday dawned clear and cold, with offshore winds that made the Pacific waves crash against Coronado Beach like artillery shells. Lena arrived at the facility to find Tank Morrison in an unusually aggressive mood, pushing candidates through combat exercises with excessive force and verbal abuse. Something had changed overnight. Tank's behavior suggested he was under pressure, possibly from his foreign contacts or from suspicions about security within his own operation. Whatever the cause, he was taking it out on the SEAL candidates who had no idea their instructor was selling their secrets to enemy governments. Rodriguez! Tank's voice echoed across the training ground as the young candidate struggled through a close-quarters combat scenario. You're moving like a tourist, not a warrior. In the real world, that hesitation gets your teammates killed. Rodriguez was exhausted. He had been running punishment exercises since dawn, carrying full combat gear through obstacle courses designed to break down elite athletes. But he wasn't complaining, wasn't asking for mercy, wasn't showing any sign that he might compromise the integrity that made him dangerous to Tank's operation. Lena watched from her observation position, documenting what appeared to be standard training, but was actually systematic abuse designed to eliminate a potential witness. Tank Morrison was using his authority as an instructor to destroy Rodriguez without leaving obvious evidence of misconduct. Dr. Morrison, Staff Sergeant Williams, approached her station. Master Chief wants to see you in his office. Says it's about your evaluation parameters. Lena felt her pulse quicken. A private meeting with Tank could mean her cover was blown, that he had discovered her real identity and purpose, but it could also be an opportunity to gather the final pieces of evidence needed to shut down his entire operation. Tank's office was Spartan and military efficient, decorated with commendations from 12 years of special operations service. Awards for valor, leadership, and dedication to protecting America. It made his betrayal even more incomprehensible to Lena, who understood the warrior ethos that Tank was violating. Close the door, document. Lena complied, noting that Tank positioned himself between her and the exit. If this meeting went badly, she would have to fight her way out of the office and probably the entire facility. I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, Tank said, settling behind his desk. About your father being a Marine, growing up on base. Got me curious about your background. My background. Ran your name through some databases last night. Dr. Lena Morrison, Department of Defense Psychological Warfare Specialist. Very impressive credentials. PhD from Georgetown, extensive experience in stress evaluation protocols, security clearance that goes pretty high up the food chain. Tank was staring at her with predatory intensity, looking for any sign that she was not who she claimed to be. Lena maintained eye contact and professional composure, knowing that any display of nervousness could confirm his suspicions. The interesting thing is, Tank continued, I couldn't find any record of Dr. Lena Morrison having a father who served in the Marine Corps. In fact, according to her personal history, both parents were civilian academics who never set foot on a military base. The trap was closing. Tank had discovered inconsistencies in her cover identity, possibly through the same classified databases he was using to steal operational intelligence. Lena had seconds to decide whether to maintain her cover or take aggressive action to protect the mission. Master Chief, I'm not sure what databases you're accessing, but my personal information should be properly classified according to Department of Defense security protocols. Perhaps there's been some kind of administrative error. Perhaps. Or perhaps Dr. Lena Morrison isn't really Dr. Lena Morrison. Tank opened his desk drawer and pulled out a service pistol a 6-hour P226 that he placed on the desktop within easy reach. The message was clear. This conversation could end with violence if Lena didn't provide satisfactory answers. "I think we should call this whole evaluation off," Tank said. "Send you back to Washington where you belong. Let the boys get on with their training without civilian interference." "That's not really my decision to make, Master Chief. Admiral Richardson specifically requested this evaluation. I imagine he'd want to know why his direct orders were being countermanded by facility personnel." It was a bluff, but a good one. Tank couldn't risk drawing attention from senior Navy leadership without exposing his own illegal activities. The mention of Admiral Richardson also reinforced Lena's legitimate connections to high-level military command. Tank's expression shifted from suspicion to calculation. He was weighing the risks of eliminating a potential threat against the dangers of acting too hastily against someone who might actually be protected by powerful military officials. "Of course, Doc. Just want to make sure we're all on the same page regarding security protocols and information management." "Absolutely. Security is everyone's responsibility." The meeting ended with false smiles and veiled threats, but Lena knew she had bought time rather than solved the problem. Tank Morrison was now actively investigating her background, and it would only be a matter of hours before he discovered that Dr. Elena Morrison was a fabricated identity created by Marine Corps intelligence. She left the office knowing that Thursday night's operation had become a race against time. They had to catch Tank in the act of transferring classified materials before he discovered her real identity and eliminated both her and any other potential witnesses. The afternoon training session focused on advanced marksmanship, with candidates practicing precision shooting under simulated combat conditions. Lena noticed that Tank had positioned himself where he could observe her activities while simultaneously supervising the weapons training. He was no longer treating her as a harmless academic observer. During a break in the exercise, Rodriguez approached her again. His face was bruised and swollen from the morning's punishment sessions, but his eyes still carried the intelligent determination that made him dangerous to Tank's operation. "Dr. Morrison, can I ask you something?" "Of course. You said your father was a Marine. Did he ever talk about honor, about doing the right thing, even when it was dangerous?" The question hit Lena harder than she expected. Her real father, Miguel Vasquez, had been a Marine who taught her that courage meant standing up for what was right regardless of personal cost. Everything she was doing at this facility was motivated by the values he had instilled in her during childhood. "Every day," she answered honestly. He said that wearing the uniform meant accepting responsibility for protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. "That's what I thought." Rodriguez glanced around to ensure they weren't being overheard. "Dr. Morrison, there are things happening here that aren't right. Things that go against everything we're supposed to stand for as military personnel." "What kind of things?" "I can't prove it, but Master Chief Morrison is doing something with classified information. Meeting with people who shouldn't be here, accessing computer systems that have nothing to do with training, recording things that should stay secret." Lena felt a surge of respect for the young candidate. Despite the physical abuse and psychological pressure Tank was applying, Rodriguez had maintained his moral compass and was willing to risk his career to report suspected misconduct. "Have you shared these concerns with other candidates?" "A few of them. The ones I trust completely. We've been trying to document what we've seen, but it's difficult when Master Chief controls every aspect of our daily routine." "What would you do if you had concrete evidence of wrongdoing?" "Report it to Navy Criminal Investigative Service, regardless of the consequences to my own career. Some things are more important than personal advancement." That settled it for Lena. Rodriguez was exactly the kind of person the SEAL teams needed, and exactly the kind of person Tank Morrison would kill to protect his operation. She had to find a way to keep him alive while completing her mission. "Rodriguez, I want you to be very careful for the next few days. Avoid being alone with Master Chief Morrison or any of his senior staff. Stay close to groups of other candidates whenever possible." "You think I'm in danger?" "I think you're asking the right questions, and that makes you a threat to people who prefer to operate in shadows." Before Rodriguez could respond, Tank's voice boomed across the training area. "Rodriguez, front and center. Time for some advanced tactical training. The young candidate straightened his shoulders and jogged toward Tank, who was standing near an isolated section of the facility where individual instruction often took place. Lena watched with growing alarm as Tank led Rodriguez away from the other candidates and instructors toward an area where screams would be muffled and witnesses would be scarce. She had to act quickly, moving with purpose, but not panic. Lena gathered her equipment and followed at a distance that allowed her to observe without being obvious. Tank was leading Rodriguez toward a maintenance building that housed cleaning supplies and rarely used training equipment. Through a small window, Lena watched Tank begin what appeared to be standard weapons instruction. But his body language was wrong, his movements too controlled, his positioning too calculated for routine training. He was setting up Rodriguez for something that had nothing to do with SEAL instruction. Tank handed Rodriguez an unloaded pistol and positioned him for dry fire practice against paper targets. Standard procedure required the instructor to remain at a safe distance while observing technique. Instead, Tank moved behind Rodriguez, close enough to grab him if necessary. Focus on your breathing, Tank instructed. Smooth trigger pull, follow through, maintain sight alignment. Rodriguez was concentrating on the training exercise, unaware that his instructor was preparing to eliminate him as a security threat. Tank's right hand moved toward a combat knife attached to his belt, positioning for a quick strike that would sever Rodriguez's carotid artery, and in the threat he posed to the intelligence operation. Lena made her decision. She couldn't maintain her cover while watching an innocent young warrior get murdered by a corrupt instructor. Her mission was important, but some things mattered more than missions. She burst through the maintenance building door just as Tank's knife cleared its sheath. Master Chief, Admiral Richardson is on the phone. Says it's urgent regarding the evaluation protocols. Tank froze, his knife half drawn, Rodriguez completely unaware of how close he had come to death. The interruption had broken Tank's concentration and timing, forcing him to abort the planned assassination. Rodriguez continued dry fire practice. I'll be right back. Tank sheathed his knife and followed Lena out of the building, his eyes burning with barely controlled rage. There's no phone call, he said once they were outside. No, there's not. But there was about to be a murder. Tank's hand moved toward his sidearm, but Lena had positioned herself where other instructors could observe them. Killing her would require explanations that Tank couldn't provide without exposing his entire operation. I don't know what you think you saw, Doc, but you're mistaken. Rodriguez needed some individual attention to correct deficiencies in his weapons handling. With a knife, I was demonstrating close-quarters combat techniques. From behind, against an unsuspecting student with an unloaded weapon, Tank realized his excuses were inadequate. But he also knew that Lena couldn't prove attempted murder without revealing knowledge that a civilian academic shouldn't possess. They were locked in a stalemate, each knowing the other was lying, each unable to take decisive action without exposing themselves. Dr. Morrison, I think your evaluation here is complete. I'll be recommending to Admiral Richardson that we conclude this assessment and return to normal training operations. That's not your decision to make, Master Chief. It is when the safety and security of this facility are at stake. They stared at each other for a long moment. Two warriors who understood that tomorrow would bring a confrontation that only one of them would survive. Tank Morrison knew his operation was compromised, and Lena Gray knew her cover was blown. All that remained was to see who could strike first. I'll be observing tomorrow's final evaluation exercise, Lena said finally. Complete documentation is required for my report to Washington. Of course, document wouldn't want you to miss anything important. As they walked back toward the main facility, Lena knew the next 24 hours would determine whether Tank Morrison's intelligence operation continued destroying American military security or ended with his arrest and prosecution. But she also knew that Rodriguez and possibly other honest personnel were now in immediate danger. Tank Morrison had 12 years of special operations experience, access to weapons and facilities, and a network of corrupted military personnel who would follow his orders without question. Lena Gray had training, determination, and the moral authority that came from fighting for the right cause. Tomorrow night would determine which of those advantages proved decisive in protecting America's military secrets from the enemies who sought to purchase them with blood money. Thursday morning arrived with an oppressive stillness that made every sound seem amplified across the Coronado training facility. Lena had spent a sleepless night preparing for what she knew would be the most dangerous day of her military career. Tank Morrison was planning something beyond the simple intelligence transfer scheduled for that evening. The final training evaluation began at 0800 hours with all remaining SEAL candidates participating in a comprehensive combat scenario that would determine their advancement to operational teams. But Lena noticed that Tank had modified the standard exercise to include live ammunition, real explosives, and isolation protocols that would separate candidates from potential witnesses. Rodriguez and for other candidates who had asked too many questions were assigned to the most dangerous section of the exercise. Tank called it advanced combat testing, but Lena recognized it as a systematic elimination plan disguised as routine training. Gentlemen, Tank addressed the selected candidates. Today you prove whether you deserve to wear the SEAL trident or go home to your mothers. This exercise simulates a real-world hostage rescue operation behind enemy lines. No backup, no support, no second chances. The candidates stood at attention, unaware they were being positioned for execution rather than evaluation. Tank had spent 3 days identifying the most perceptive and morally upright candidates, the ones most likely to report suspicious activities to higher authorities. Now he was preparing to eliminate them under the cover of training accidents. Lena activated the emergency beacon hidden in her briefcase, sending a coded signal to Agent Webb and the FBI response team positioned outside the facility. The plan called for waiting until Tank's evening intelligence transfer, but circumstances were forcing an immediate response to prevent multiple murders. Master Chief, she approached Tank as he briefed the candidates. I'll need to position additional recording equipment for proper documentation of this exercise. Negative document. This is a classified evaluation. Your current observation position provides adequate assessment capability. Tank wasn't allowing her access to the exercise area because he knew she would interfere with the planned assassinations. Every candidate assigned to the advanced evaluation would die in carefully orchestrated accidents that would be blamed on the inherent dangers of elite military training. The exercise began with candidates moving through a mock urban environment populated with mannequin hostages and cardboard enemy targets. But Tank had positioned real explosive charges throughout the scenario, devices that could be detonated remotely to eliminate specific individuals without leaving evidence of deliberate murder. Lena watched through binoculars as Rodriguez led his team through the opening phase of the exercise. His movements were precise and professional, demonstrating the tactical skills that would make him an exceptional SEAL operator. But those same skills made him a threat to Tank's operation that had to be permanently neutralized. Impressive candidates, commented a voice behind Lena. She turned to find one of Tank's foreign contacts, the man with the accented English who had visited earlier in the week. He was watching the exercise with the calculating gaze of someone evaluating a commercial product. What are you doing here? Lena demanded, observing the final demonstration before tonight's transaction. Master Chief Morrison wanted us to see the quality of American Special Operations training before we finalize our business arrangement. The man was Russian, probably SVR intelligence service based on his operational behavior and language patterns. He was here to witness the elimination of potential security threats and to evaluate the classified techniques that Tank would be selling later that evening. These young men represent significant investment in time and resources, the Russian continued. It would be unfortunate if training accidents reduced their numbers unnecessarily. Accidents. Military training is inherently dangerous, Dr. Morrison. Sometimes even the best prepared candidates suffer mishaps that end their careers prematurely. Lena realized the Russian wasn't just observing. He was here to ensure that Tank followed through on the elimination plan, that no potential witnesses survived to threaten the intelligence operation. The Foreign Intelligence Service had paid for SEAL training techniques and complete security from American investigations. In the exercise area, Rodriguez's team was approaching the building where Tank had positioned the primary explosive charges. The scenario called for candidates to breach the structure and neutralize enemy forces while protecting civilian hostages. But Tank would detonate the charges when the candidates were inside, killing all 5 men in what would appear to be a training mishap caused by excessive explosive force. Lena couldn't wait for FBI backup. Rodriguez and his teammates had less than 10 minutes before Tank murdered them to protect his intelligence operation. "Excuse me," she told the Russian observer. "I need to check my recording equipment." She walked calmly toward the equipment building while calculating angles, distances, and timing. Tank was positioned at the exercise control station with clear sight lines to the target building. The detonator for the explosive charges was in his hands, ready to trigger the blast that would eliminate 5 American warriors. Lena opened her briefcase and removed the concealed Glock 19 that Agent Webb had provided for emergency situations. She had hoped to complete this mission without violence, but Tank Morrison's willingness to commit mass murder had changed the parameters of engagement. The challenge was stopping Tank without exposing Rodriguez and his team to even greater danger. If Tank realized his operation was compromised, he might detonate the charges immediately rather than risk losing control of the situation. Lena moved through the facility with practiced stealth, using buildings and equipment to mask her approach to Tank's control station. Marine Corps reconnaissance training had taught her to move like a shadow, invisible until the moment of contact with enemy forces. Tank was focused on the exercise, watching Rodriguez's team through binoculars while his thumb rested on the detonator trigger. Staff Sergeant Williams stood beside him, also monitoring the candidate's progress toward the kill zone. 30 seconds to breach, Williams reported. "Charges are armed and ready for detonation." "Copy. Initiate on my command." Lena was 20 meters away, close enough to hear their conversation, but not close enough to prevent Tank from triggering the explosives if he became aware of her presence. She needed a clean shot that would eliminate Tank instantly before he could murder 5 innocent men. She dropped to a prone firing position behind a concrete barrier, steadying her pistol on the solid surface while calculating bullet trajectory and wind compensation. At this range, with this target, there was no margin for error. Missing would result in the immediate death of Rodriguez and his entire team. Tank raised the detonator, preparing to murder 5 American warriors to protect his illegal profits from selling military secrets to foreign governments. His finger moved toward the trigger that would end 5 promising military careers and 5 young lives. Lena Gray pulled the trigger once. The 9mm bullet struck Tank Morrison in the right temple, penetrating his brain and killing him instantly. He collapsed without triggering the detonator, his body falling away from the explosive control system as Staff Sergeant Williams spun around in shock and confusion. "Federal agent, drop your weapons and get on the ground." Williams reached for his sidearm, but Lena's second shot struck him in the chest before he could draw the pistol. He fell backwards, wounded but alive, as FBI vehicles crashed through the facility gates and armed agents swarmed the training area. "Abort! Abort! Abort!" Lena shouted into her radio microphone, warning Rodriguez's team to evacuate the target building immediately. Exercise terminated. "Clear the structure now." In the exercise area, Rodriguez heard the gunshots and abort command. His training took over, and he led his team away from the target building just as FBI explosive specialists arrived to disarm Tank's murder devices. Agent Webb reached Lena's position within minutes, finding her standing over Tank Morrison's body while keeping Williams under armed guard. The corrupt Master Chief would never again betray American military secrets or threaten the lives of honest warriors. Status: Webb demanded. "Tank is dead. Williams is wounded, but stable. The explosive charges were disarmed before detonation. Candidates are safe." And the Russian observer? Gone. Probably left the facility when the shooting started. Webb nodded grimly. They had stopped the immediate threat, but Tank's foreign contact had escaped to establish intelligence operations elsewhere. The fight against military espionage would continue, but this particular battle was over. Rodriguez approached cautiously, his team following behind him with weapons ready. They had heard gunfire and received abort commands, but they weren't sure what had happened or who was responsible for the emergency. Dr. Morrison? Rodriguez stared at the bodies, the FBI agents, and the woman who had claimed to be a civilian academic but was obviously a trained military operative. What's going on here? Lena holstered her pistol and faced the young SEAL candidate whose life she had just saved. My name is Lena Gray, and I'm a Marine Corps intelligence officer. Master Chief Morrison was selling classified military information to foreign governments. He was planning to kill you and your teammates to prevent you from reporting his activities. Kill us? During a training exercise. The explosive charges in that building were real, Rodriguez. Real enough to eliminate everyone inside and make it look like a training accident. Rodriguez absorbed this information with the calm professionalism that would make him an excellent SEAL operator. He had suspected something was wrong, had tried to gather evidence, had been willing to risk his career to report suspected misconduct. Now he understood how close he had come to paying for his integrity with his life. What happens now, he asked. Now you continue your training under honest instructors who won't sell your secrets to the highest bidder. You become the kind of SEAL operator that America needs, someone who fights for the right reasons and protects the innocent. And you? I go back to hunting traitors and spies who threaten our national security. There are more Tank Morrisons out there, more networks of corruption that need to be exposed and eliminated. As FBI agents secured the scene and Navy investigators began documenting the extent of Tank's intelligence operation, Lena thought about the young warriors she had protected. Rodriguez and his teammates would go on to serve in the most dangerous missions around the world, never knowing how many lives had been saved by stopping Tank Morrison's espionage network. The classified files recovered from Tank's office revealed the scope of his betrayal. Training videos, tactical procedures, personnel records, mission reports, and operational intelligence that had been sold to Russian, Chinese, and Iranian intelligence services. American military operations have been compromised for over 2 years, resulting in mission failures and combat deaths that could have been prevented. But the network was larger than just Tank Morrison. The investigation would continue, following money trails and communication records to identify other corrupted military personnel who were selling American secrets. Some would be officers, some enlisted, some civilian contractors who had access to classified information. Lena Gray would hunt them all. It was what she did, what she had trained for, what her father had taught her was necessary to protect the country and the warriors who defended it. She was a Marine, a hunter of traitors, a guardian of secrets that kept America safe. 2 weeks later, Rodriguez graduated from BUD/S training and received his SEAL Trident in a ceremony attended by his family and friends. He had no idea that Lena Gray was watching from the back of the auditorium, smiling with quiet pride as another honest warrior joined the ranks of America's elite defenders. Tank Morrison's intelligence network had been dismantled, its members arrested or under surveillance, its foreign contacts identified and monitored. The damage would take years to fully assess and repair, but no more American secrets would flow to enemy governments through this particular channel. Rodriguez caught sight of Lena as the ceremony concluded. He excused himself from his family and approached her with the confident bearing of a newly minted SEAL operator. Colonel Gray, it's just Lena now. Congratulations on earning your trident, Rodriguez. You're going to make an exceptional SEAL. I wanted to thank you for saving our lives, for stopping Morrison, for protecting all of us from something we didn't even know was happening. Thank me by being the kind of warrior this country deserves. Lead with honor, fight with courage, and never compromise your principles for money or convenience. Yes, ma'am. Always. Rodriguez returned to his family celebration, and Lena Gray disappeared into the crowd. She had new assignments waiting, new traitors to hunt, new secrets to protect. The war against espionage never ended, but battles could be won by people willing to pull the trigger when innocent lives hung in the balance. She had pulled the trigger once and shut down an entire network of military corruption. Tomorrow, she would be ready to pull it again if necessary. Because that's who Lena Gray was, a Marine who protected the protectors, a warrior who hunted the hunters, a guardian who never let betrayal go unpunished. The SEAL candidates would become legends in their own right, fighting battles around the world that would never make headlines. But they would fight those battles with techniques and procedures that remained classified, protected by a woman who had been willing to kill to keep them safe. That was enough. That was everything.